Hi, class. So, what we are going to attempt to do today is to talk a little bit about energy efficiency, and that's going to be our topic for the week. I would like to draw your attention, if possible, to the week three to do list, right? Where we are going to talk about what we want to do. So, we're going to learn about energy efficiency in America. We're going to learn about what it is, how it's measured, who enforces the rules, and we'll learn about the politics that energy efficiency policy creates. Um, so those type of politics are going to involve things like interest groups, right? It may be if you don't set the laws up right that, for example, your local gas or electric company would prefer homes and businesses to be less efficient because then they would sell more units of electricity and more units of natural gas, right? And then by selling more, theoretically, they could profit more. Um, it turns out that most states have gone through something that Rhode Island's gone through called decoupling, which proves that not to be true. Um, it becomes not true because we find other ways for the electric and gas utilities to generate revenue than simply volume sales. Um, and so, what we end up doing as a state is setting targets. In Rhode Island, we have something called least cost procurement. I want you to pay close attention to the idea of least cost procurement. It's very simple. It goes like this. Um, National Grid, or nowadays Rhode Island Energy, which is the electric and gas utility for most of Rhode Island, with the exception of the Pasco Utility District and Block Island, formerly, um, ends up having to do all of the expedient and affordable energy efficiency that is cheaper than buying an additional unit of energy from power producers. And what I mean to say by that is they have to go out and do things like run the programs um, and hire subcontractors like Rise to do energy audits on your homes, to walk in and then do either discounted or free, um, modern thermostats, blown-in insulation, all of these types of weather sealing and other efficiency measures. They're actually required by Rhode Island state law to take before they can go out and buy additional units of energy. And what that ultimately does, and why that's ultimately important, is that it decouples the way that they generate revenue from simply volume sales. So there's a separate bill that happened apart from least cost procurement called decoupling, which basically says that the amount of profit that the Public Utilities Commission, which grants these electric utilities and then gas utilities a natural monopoly, meaning they have no competition within the state of Rhode Island. They control the grid and the distribution infrastructure for both electricity and gas in their geography, and they get to argue in front of the quasi judicial body that is known as the Public Utilities Commission in the state of Rhode Island, um, that the rates they are charging are just and fair, and the profit they are making is reasonable and not excessive. And the commission can allow them to take profit for doing things like facilitating energy efficiency now, so that these big companies don't always have to be on the opposite side uh, of any sort of efficiency measures. So what I'm hoping is that this week gives you a solid understanding of the importance of energy efficiency, and next week we'll break it down further. So I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of slides this week. I would like to point you to the Appendix C image that is in your week three to-do list. That is an overview of the entire energy consumption market in the United States in 2019, which was about 100 quads, which makes it nice and easy round number to work with. You can think every quad is about 1% of the total energy used, and you'll still be about right. Um, of course, that's what's ultimately consumed. What I would like to draw your attention to in that image, and I put that image right there on our week three to do website to make it easy to find, is to see exactly how much of that energy we consume goes to energy services, which means useful energy we actually want, like heat for our homes, electricity to run our toasters and our, charge our batteries and do all this stuff, versus rejected energy. Rejected energy you can think of as energy that goes up the flue or out the tailpipe. In every energy system, be it a car's internal combustion engine or the wood stove sitting in your house or something much more technologically complicated like, a ground source heat pump installed in your house, regardless of what it is, you only get a fraction of the energy you end up actually burning out of the system for a useful purpose. The rest of it goes up the flue. So if you throw logs in the wood stove, you will get some heat. That heat will transfer out to your house. The more efficient the wood stove, the more of that heat you can capture. But ultimately, a lot of that heat, right up the chimney, right? Right up the flue. Same with your car. You could have a more or less efficient automobile, but as long as you're burning gas, you're going to have some of that radiating out as waste heat out of the front of your car through the radiator and the grill, out of the back of your car through the exhaust, and there's no way around it. Some percentage of the energy created from the gasoline you burn by driving around is going to get rejected as waste heat, and it's just going to get wasted. If you're cranking the air conditioning on a summer day, you have a bunch of heat created by that engine that is, obviously having to radiate out, right? You don't want it in the cabin of your car. So rejected energy is a real thing. And in every system, there's a lot of it. But there's particularly a lot in transportation and electric sectors. We're a little bit better when it comes to the thermal sector at being efficient. So I want you to pay attention to that. And I would like you to just pay attention to this first slide here. This first slide here talks about the strengths and challenges to legislating and regulating energy efficiency at each jurisdictional level. But what it really talks about is how there are benefits and drawbacks to regulating energy efficiency at the federal, state, and local level. Most of the action in Rhode Island today in 2023 really happens at the state level. That's how it's set up now. It does not have to be that way, it simply is. The advantage of federal legislation, you can have broad-scale initiatives, uniform standards, specialized technical assistance, all sorts of low-hanging fruit that's easy to get. I'm going to give you an example. Per capita, the average person in Wyoming, right? So if you take all of the carbon production per capita that we use, if you take all of the carbon output per capita based on individuals' energy consumption by state, right? So it's per person, per state, how much carbon output comes from energy consumption. Wyoming beats Rhode Island by about 1,600%. That is, the average person in Wyoming is pumping out about 16 times the CO2 as the average Rhode Islander. So there is low-hanging fruit because we have something like least cost procurement and decoupling in Rhode Island, but there are states, particularly in the plains and mountains and south, where they don't do any of that. Wyoming is one of them. Wyoming might surprise you. It's the biggest coal-producing state in the country, bigger than West Virginia, and it's just about the dirtiest. It usually competes with West Virginia for the maximum output of CO2. And so, good, bad, or otherwise, there's environmental effects there and negative externalities that come with pumping that much CO2 into the atmosphere. But what does Wyoming get in exchange? They get to run very, very large coal plants that produce a lot of electricity relatively cheaply, and they don't put any effort into efficiency. So to the extent you think efficiency is important and we should do it as a nationwide initiative, I think the advantage is really getting states like Wyoming up to the level of at least states like Pennsylvania, if not states like Rhode Island. At the state level, you can really run ahead of the federal government, and that's what New England at large has largely done. But Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont in particular tend to be ahead of the curve in the country on this. We compete with California and maybe Washington and only a couple other states. And then at the local level, tends to be very limited. The problem with local government is, there tends to not be much money there, and there tends to be limited legislative authority in the form of town ordinances that they can do a fair amount, and you can do some building code stuff and whatnot, but you rarely get the chance to do the large scale legislating that the state can do.